Bible is full of stories that we all know and love. But how well do we know them? The answer might surprise you. The Bible you thought you knew is going to dive deep into the exquisite details of the biblical stories that make them fascinating and transforming. In this week's podcast, we will deal with the prophetic book of Obadiah. This is the shortest book in the Old Testament. Despite its size, we will treat this in 2 successive weeks. This is an unfamiliar book, to say the least. Yet it deals with Edom, the country whose eponymous ancestor was Esau, the elder son of Isaac and Rebekah. That means that Esau/Edom was the elder brother of Jacob, who became Israel. Therefore, Edom is not just another foreign nation that is near to Israel. Edom and Israel were as closely related as fraternal twins could be. The fact that Esau/Edom and Jacob/Israel were born within seconds of each other only makes their relationship that much closer. Remember that the younger baby had grabbed the heel of his own brother during birth. Jacob had grabbed Esau's heel. As 2 countries, they should have been the closest of allies. Instead, they became bitter enemies. The book of Obadiah makes the animosity between them crystal clear. Almost nothing is known about Obadiah himself. All we know is the vitriolic attitude the text displays toward Esau/Edom. Of course, the narrative parts of the Old Testament have a mixed approach toward the character Esau and the country named for him, Edom. There are 3 stories that feature Esau, all in Genesis. The first one is the episode where he sells his birthright to his twin brother Jacob, primarily because Esau thought he was about to starve to death. That's in verses 29 to 34 of chapter 25 of Genesis. In the second story, Esau is outwitted and outmaneuvered by both his brother Jacob and Rebekah, his mother. The latter 2 conspired to have Jacob go to Isaac, the twins' father, in disguise so that the patriarch would bless Jacob instead of Esau. That story is found in Genesis 27. The final story is when, 20 years after he had been robbed of his father's blessing, Esau graciously greeted Jacob when he was returning home. That's in verses 4 through 17 of chapter 33 of Genesis. Only in the first episode is Esau depicted negatively. For now, we will not comment on how unbrotherly Jacob was in that incident. Esau can hardly be blamed for falling victim to his mother's scheming and Jacob's willingness to go along with his mother's plan to dupe Isaac and to steal the blessing. Of course, Esau's later acceptance of and forgiving Jacob in the reunion scene is among the most moving scenes in the whole Bible. Given this record, Esau does not fare badly in other respects. The country named for him, Edom, had kings before Israel ever had kings. That point is made in Genesis chapter 36, verse 31. As well, Esau ended up being a wealthy man. That's in verses 6 through 8 of chapter 36. Plus, Esau's territory had been allotted to him, and therefore Edom, by the Israelite deity. That's found in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 5, 12, and 22. In short, even though Esau will never be the child of promise for God's elect people, there is no reason why Esau cannot be treated as a revered brother. That is the reason why in Deuteronomy Esau/Edom is acknowledged as Jacob/Israel's brother and is therefore to be treated accordingly due to that sacred relationship. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 7. Unfortunately, however, Israel and Edom seldom enjoyed amicable relationships. Quite often they were at odds. Indeed, they were usually enemies. It was this situation that is reflected in the biblical book of Obadiah. As the oracle begins, Edom is served notice at the outset that the Lord has targeted this country, that a battle cry is being heard in Israel. That's in verse 1. Of course, Obadiah only has one chapter, so you'd only have to cite verses. The goal is to reduce Edom's size and make the country despised. That's in verse 2. Edom is initially depicted as arrogant, as believing in their own invulnerability. Verse 3. That hubris, though, will not deter God. Edom may think of itself as an eagle that soars high above the ground and nests among the stars, but God will have no trouble in bringing that bird down. Verse 4. The prophetic oracle continues by envisaging Edom being pillaged by thieves at night. Such thievery will not be a one-time disaster. Other thieves will enter Edom's house, so to speak. That's in verse 5. Being plundered by robbers becomes a metaphor for the fact that Edom cannot count on its political allies. Edom believes that these countries are allies and confederates, but the opposite is true. Poor Edom, it is relying on the very people who are setting a trap. That's in verse 7. Of course, one of the ways to deal with such political treachery is to become aware of it. But Edom's wise men, any who understand such dynamics, have been destroyed by Israel's God, thus leaving Edom helpless. Verse 8. Even these brilliant Edomites will be subject to the coming devastation, quote unquote, on that day, a familiar phrase describing a day of divine judgment. This punishment that awaits Edom is due to its treatment of its brother Israel. Edom has been violent toward Israel. Esau has been violent toward Jacob. It does not matter that it was, so to speak, a passive violence. When foreign countries carried off Israel's wealth, and when they cast lots to determine who could sack Jerusalem, Edom stood aloof. That country did not lift a finger to help Israel, its brother. A brother looked the other way when another brother was being assaulted. That's in verse 11. Worse, not only did Edom stand by to watch the carnage, it gloated over Israel's misfortune. Even though a brother was suffering from unimaginable misfortune, the brother standing by rejoiced and even bragged about what was happening. That's in verse 13. This is the behavior one expects from enemies who detest each other. It is not the behavior that one expects between brothers. As it turns out, not all the violence that Edom committed against Israel was of a passive variety. When Israelite fugitives arrived in Edomite territory as they fled the disaster of military defeat and possible exile, Edom did not offer safety or asylum. Instead, they turned against these fugitives, delivering survivors to the hated enemy. Again, a betrayal of that sort on the part of brothers is nothing short of abominable. That's in verse 14. Clearly, this prophetic text is a product of the exile. Due to the reference to Jerusalem, Almost certainly this prophecy is alluding to the destruction of the southern kingdom, Judah, at the hands of Babylon. Over 100 years prior, the Assyrians destroyed the northern kingdom. Judah was the last vestige of the elect people of God who had a hold on a section of the Promised Land. When Judah was attacked, the threat against Israel was existential. It was on the verge of not surviving as a community. Edom had to know that. No matter how bad this fraternal relationship had been in the past, how could any brother in good conscience not do something to reverse this awful situation? But Edom did nothing, and it gleefully watched Judah get not only defeated militarily, but exiled as well. When enemies do that, though detestable, it is understandable. When brothers do that, it is all but incomprehensible. This little book packs a powerful prophetic punch. It is unfortunate that it is not well known. After all, it does not merely denounce a run-of-the-mill rival of Israel. Instead, it engages a country that is derivative of Esau, Isaac and Rebekah's elder son. Esau had been favored by Isaac, who turned out to be hapless when bestowing the blessing. Esau's scheming mother had orchestrated this whole affair. Yet, ultimately, Esau came to grips with the reality that his younger brother would be the child of promise. Somehow, in time, those lovely fraternal feelings did not translate into Edom as a people. Edom became indistinguishable from other foreign nations with whom Israel had a perpetual rocky relationship. That is why Obadiah lumps Edom with other nations who one day will experience the wrath and judgment of the Israelite God. To that part of the prophecy we will turn in next week's podcast. Let me encourage you to go to my website, faspina.com. Let me know what your email is so that I'll have a way to contact you. If you want me to answer a question in a subsequent Q&A period, write me at or text me at fspina@gmail.com. I want to thank you so very much for listening to The Bible You Thought You Knew. I have a question for you. Do you have a question or topic that you'd like me to cover on the podcast? If so, all you need to do is head over to Apple Podcasts and do two simple things. One, leave a rating and review telling me what you think of the podcast. Two, in that review, ask anything you want related to the Bible. That's all you have to do. Then, listen in to hear your question answered on a future episode. Join us next time on The Bible You Thought You Knew when we discuss Jesus' personal Bible. God bless.